One is 7:01 p.m., February 27, 2024. Welcome to the town of Madison budget public hearing being presented to the Board of Finance. I'm going to introduce our Board of Finance members. Some are here, some are not. We have our Vice Chair, Gene Fitzgerald, Bob Donahue, Matt Gordon, Jude Hessian, Katie Stein, and John Rasmussen. I know Katie is a little under the weather, and I know, pretty sure that Matt is also, so I just want to recognize that. I also would be remiss if I don't mention Stacey Novitz and her team and the finance. I mean, they're absolutely amazing. So I want to say thank you for all that you do. You know, it says here, if you want to go through the slides, the overall budget process, or I can. Go to the next couple to the overall budget process.
So you got to, yes, like, you have the remote?
I do. Was it not?
Did you turn it on?
Oh, did I not turn it on? That's tricky on the side there.
Yeah, I see it.
Just have her switch the slides.
You do it, Gene.
All right, one more time.
There you go.
I'm stubborn. All right.
There.
So, you know, the overall budget process starts in September with the town and education staff who go getting together. The process is about everyone working together, not just the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education, but the superintendent, the first selectman, all the department heads, everybody working together to do the best we can. And we work together. This way we always agree, and it's not that everybody gets what they want. But that's the process. It's to come together and do the best we can. And the board helps the budgets throughout, you know, the fall. So in January, we have a combined BOS and BOF meeting for town staff, and then you have a combined BOS, Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, Board of Finance for the education budget. The process up until now. So the Board of Education budget has been approved and recommended by the Board of Selectmen. The town budget has been approved by the Board of Selectmen. And now the Board of Finance received both recommended budgets. And so they've been working on this. We'll still communicate, we'll still talk back and forth. The Board of Finance now has their work to do, and that's why I started by saying, introducing our Board of Finance members. We work extremely well together. Again, we don't always agree on everything, but it's working together to do the best we can. And it's very important that we get public input. We do want to hear from the public. You know, everybody, I'm sure if you talk to any department heads, and I'm sure you're going to hear from first selectwoman and the superintendent, they would like more. So we do want to hear from you. Doesn't mean, you know, everybody gets what they want. We want to hear your input. And we can't stress that enough. So, you know, we have budget meetings, we have workshops, we'll have another public hearing in April. We want to hear from the public. We want to hear your concerns, your thoughts, what's on your mind. So like I said, what's next? Maybe the batteries are down.
She said one Mississippi. That's what we were told.
So what's next? Board of Finance has budget workshops. We'll have a second public hearing on April 18th. That's the new date, correct?
Yes.
April 18th. The Board of Finance will recommend the fiscal 25 budget. And the referendum's on May 14th. And then the Board of Finance, after the referendum on May 14th, will set the mill rate on May 15th, 2024. So tonight, you're going to hear obviously from our superintendent, our first select woman, and they're going to present the budget to the Board of Finance. So I believe, Dr. Cook, you're up first. So we'd like to hear it. How about giving our superintendent a round of applause? A lot of Board of Education members. Thank you. Working.
Something. Tell Jean to do it. Is it
Just
far away?
I'll follow along.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jean.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. Thank you for the Board of Finance for having us. If you can advance to the next slide. You know, as Chairman Picard shared, this process does start in September, and you know, sometimes even sooner as we start to get numbers in. And so you know, my staff at the schools start having discussions with their departments and you know, at the teacher level, at the paraprofessional level, you know, very early on in the school year. So it's kind of almost a continual budget process. As a central office team, we work with Stacy Novitz and her staff and start to look at numbers and get advanced looks as much as possible. We start to look at personnel very early on as well, because that is the main driver of our budget. A school district is a people business, and so you know, the majority of our funding goes directly to staffing. As we look at what the board's approved budget is as we stand today, it's 3.41%. And you know, you'll see, and I'm going to go through all those categories as we go forward, but I want to put that out there as we start out, you know, in terms of the percentage. Next slide, please. So one of the things I'm very proud to share, because this represents, you know, what we're paying for, you know, as a town of Madison, what the funding goes towards, and you know, just one brief slide on our results. You know, very proud to share when the state of Connecticut did their next generation accountability results, that Madison was the top district in the entire state on that. You know, so we outperformed where we had been before. We're very proud of that, you know, and a lot of work goes into that, from, you know, families in town supporting our work, and teachers and paraprofessionals, clerical staff, custodians, you know, everybody has a piece in this, and our fantastic administrative team, you know, kind of pulls that all together. So we've been working through this, you know, very directly with our schools over the last few years, and each school has a school development plan that identifies their areas where they want to grow, where they can maintain, you know, great results, and you know, areas that they also want to address, and it includes social emotional learning as well. You know, we're not just about academics. You know, so much of what we do is social emotional health for our students, but I think that's, you know, one place I can show a quick soundbite in terms of return of investment for the town of Madison. You know, we knew this was going to be a difficult budget year. We went into this knowing that our health insurance was going to be higher, that we were coming off of a major grant that supported our work, and that we had 4 staffing positions that were very important to us, you know, based on those 2 things I shared, social emotional in the form of social workers, and interventionists in the form of our academic results. So we had 4 positions coming off, and so we have decreased 4 positions going into next year. We have a reduction in force at the high school of 3 positions, and then we have a curriculum lead position that is ending their time in that position, and so that ends at the end of the year. So it's 4 positions coming off a grant. They already are with the organization, but we have 4 positions that we are decreasing to counteract that increase that hits the budget. Contractual increases, so not too recent past, you saw 2% in this area. Contracts are going up. That is the norm across the state and the nation. So we're looking at a 3.2%, which is probably a little bit slightly below average for other districts. Small increases in payroll taxes and HR benefits is typical for you know, each year. So when I mentioned health insurance, this is again an account not too long ago. We saw a 0% increase. We've seen 2% increases. So this is a pretty big increase for us. It represents 1.25% of our overall increase that we're asking for. So you know, about a third of that increase is just health insurance alone that we you know, are contractually required, you know, required by law to provide to our employees. I will say, you know, as a school district, we have one of the highest employee payments in the state. Our teachers pay, you know, on about 23% for health insurance, and so that is definitely on the high end, or other groups as well. So our bargaining units have stepped up to help us mitigate some of the increases that we do see in health insurance. Again, we see a much less increase than other areas, other school districts in our area. Special education, another area that has not increased as much as we see other school districts doing that are having to add staff members. We do have students that are placed outside of the district, and so there's always increases in that area. We've done some work to decrease transportation, and then we have some other small increases. But again, as this special ed is growing by percentage-wise across the state, and so that is really a positive that it is only growing 0.3% of our budget. Next slide, please. Facilities. So no surprise here. I think that we all see this in our home bills. Electricity has gone up, and so that certainly hits our school district, and then water as well. It's a pretty large increase for water, but in terms of the total dollar amount, it's not a huge increase. We also face increase in custodial supplies, and we are attempting to build back an account that paid for planned and cycle maintenance in the school district that at one time was $700,000. Today it stands at about $440,000. So we're working hard to rebuild that. We have schools that we have to maintain. We are really excited to bring on a new school in 2025 and retire 2 of our older schools, but we still have schools that are needing maintenance and each and every year, and we need to be proactive in that area. And so we're trying to build back that account in forms of increased maintenance. I also will share that anything we do in our schools for maintenance costs more now than it did a few years ago. And so again, that's not a surprise to either individuals or on the town side for what they see. We have 2 more years. This next year being the second to last, and the year after that, 2025, 26 budget will be the last year that we have expiring debt at the high school. So we do benefit from that on our end. It's 0.95%, about 1% of our budget. It would be higher by that amount if we did not have expiring debt. So the high school debt is on the Board of Ed side. That's a little unique. That decision was made 20 plus years ago, and it is off the board side as well. So we benefit from that. So please keep that in mind when you look at this next slide. We thought it was important, if you follow budgeting processes in other towns, the numbers are huge this year. We've seen numbers in the 12 to 18% range in some towns. I think it's most important to share communities that we're compared to, around the state in the Durg B area. We are at this moment, based on what's been approved by the Board of Eds in those communities, we are still the lowest. So I think we've done a really good job of being proactive, making reductions where we can, and controlling spending, everywhere we can. As I mentioned, this is a full year process that the finance staff and my staff work on to be able to keep our number at a reasonable rate. And then the last slide, I thought it was also important to show where we have been historically. So you will see the numbers starting to increase, but again, we are well below state average in pretty much every one of those years we have been below state average. In a 1.6% over a 6-year average is very low. So I thank our staff, and this is not to say that we don't get tremendous support from the town, from the community. I think we are very well supported, but I think that we recognize that there's been difficult times recently, and that we're trying to keep our numbers down. We have also benefited in this realm from declining enrollment, so we've been able to reduce staff where we've had reductions in students, and so we're starting to see a nice increase at the elementary level of enrollment as predicted, and we still are seeing a decrease at the high school, which is just about leveled off at about 740 students. And so we're we're excited to see the increase in students coming forward. We've got a great plan for that, and we'll be prepared at the middle school, high school when those larger classes come through. So that is my presentation tonight. Okay, back to you, John.
Thank you, Dr.
Okay,
Cook.
thank you. Thank you.
First Selectwoman, are you ready?
Wanna go next, okay?
Yes, I would like you to go next.
I guess there's no one else, right? Got it stuck. All right, great, thank you. All right, thank you very much, everybody. So if you can go to the first slide. I want to just introduce our board. I think everybody's here tonight. Al Goldberg, Scott Murphy, Jen Gordon, and Bruce Wilson. We worked very well together over the last month or so, and our process is a little bit different. What the town did this year was the staff kind of submitted a requested budget, and that budget was then forwarded to both the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, and we had a joint workshop with the Board of Finance in January, and then I came away from that and came back to my board with a recommended budget. So I spent a lot of time working really closely with the staff, trying to identify cost-saving opportunities, and I got to give a lot of credit to the staff. They took it to heart, and we were able to reduce that budget by over $400,000. And sometimes you just have to sit back and go and look through what are you spending, where are you spending, why are you spending, and think through those things. And so I have a lot of appreciation for the staff because they were able to identify at least $100,000 worth of savings when we did that exercise. So those savings are reflected in this budget. And then I took that budget and moved that forward to our board for our first Board of Selectmen workshop. And then we spent 2 meetings going through making refinements and revisions and coming up with the budget we're presenting today. And once again, I always present kind of what our goals are. And one of the new things is we have a town strategic plan that the board passed in December. And so we're trying to use that as a mindset as we go through our budgeting process. This is the first year, so we didn't really have an opportunity to do it in a detailed way, but that was always in the back of our minds. Also a goal that really, I think a lot of boards, my board and previous boards have always tried to minimize that tax increase. And the town has traditionally tried to keep that below 2%. And so we continue to approach this whole budgeting process. That includes not just the budget, but also the mill rate, which falls in the hands of the Board of Finance, to keep that number down below 2%. So we were always looking for ways to make sure that the impact to the taxpayer is less than 2% on their tax bill. The other thing is planning for those bonding projects. We're now kind of in it because we started bonding, but we've been setting up for this bonding over the last couple of years. We've made certain investments in our capital plan ahead of time, knowing that the bonding was coming on so we could reduce other things in the budget to absorb the interest expense. And so we're kind of, towards the middle of the beginning of that process, I will say. The other thing is going after state and federal grants. And we've been successful, over $14 million in the last 4 years that the town has secured to offset the need for local taxpayer dollars. And that's reflected through our capital plan. So less money that we have to tax local taxpayers. We always look for operational efficiencies. We're continuing to support public safety in this budget, enhance existing services, new resources, and find cost savings. And then finally, we're committed to our capital program. I think one of the reasons we got in the position we are now with a lot of projects and necessary projects is that sometimes just to keep taxes reasonable, we had to cut capital. And so we weren't investing in our facilities. We weren't fixing things in town. So that's part of this Madison investment plan that I've talked a lot about, is trying to be able to balance both with a long-term vision. So we can go to the next slide. So where we are now, the Board of Selectmen passed a operational budget totaling $26.5 million, which represents a 3.1% operational increase, and an overall town budget that reflects the capital and the debt service of 4.2%. And I do want to say that we've kind of tried to keep, since I came into office, I've tried to keep the growth of the operating budget at a reduced rate. And last year, as you'll see on the next slide, was a little below 3%. Right now, we're a little above 3%. So we're kind of in that same space, but then in addition to that, our town budget is actually going down or growing at a lower rate than it did last year. But as you'll see on the bottom, what the board then tried to do, and this is really the Board of Finance's job, but we want to show the context of what our budget means. We tried to apply the Board of Education's budget and then our budget and come up with a mill rate calculation. And this is kind of a, unusual year because of the revaluation, and I know there's been a lot of citizens' concerns. Taxes are gonna go crazy because of the reval, and so, and we said all along, the mill rate will go down. The mill rate will come down because we have a higher grand list, and when you go through that calculation, it results in a lower mill rate. So where we're coming out a little bit right now, and the board took liberties on some assumptions to calculate that mill rate. It's not our job to do that. Those are decisions, and we're gonna be making a list of recommendations to the Board of Finance about how to get to that. But it comes into a mill rate reduction of 26% down to 22.09. So, if we were to keep our budget the same, we've made some suggestions about the education budget and made some suggestions on revenue projections. The Board of Finance kind of has a path to get to this, but obviously this is their decision to do. We just wanted to give them some suggestions. So we go to the next slide. So this just highlights historically, and as I talked about the operational budget, 5 or 6 years ago, it was growing at a much higher rate, and we've worked hard to keep those expenses not growing as quickly as they have. And this is despite keeping in mind, we hit high inflation in 2022, but we still managed to keep the overall growth of the operating budget, I think, at a much reasonable level and below inflation rates. We're now at an inflation rate, and now they're talking just generally in the economy at around 3%. Next slide. So what's driving this growth? Well, half of the town budget is personnel costs, and I'll talk later a bit about some of that. But obviously, we just like the Board of Ed, and we kind of share our healthcare. We saw big numbers this year. We saw big numbers last year. It hit the budget. We had a couple of good years. We're a small pool. We're self-insured. And so experience rates impact things. And then also we, like a lot of other communities, COVID, people didn't go to the doctor, didn't get procedures done. And so now we've seen the surge of people using healthcare again. And so that's really hit the budget. So that's 25% of the $1.4 million town budget increase. And then in our salaries and benefits, we've also had some new union contracts. And a majority of that relates to our public safety contracts. We've made an investment in our police, and we put an attractive contract into place where now we're starting to see that come forward into the budget. Capital is another area that we're continuing to kind of front load some of our capital expenses so that as debt starts to go up, we can reduce that number. And we're seeing debt service go up a little bit more. And I do want to comment that the debt service, we issued some new bonds at the end of last year. So that's why we're seeing that debt service come, because we're starting construction on the new school. But this does not reflect the reduction in debt from the Daniel Hand High School bonds. And as Dr. Cook mentioned, for some reason, the town kind of put that on the school budget. But the reality is most towns don't do that. All debt it's a town obligation, and it falls within the town budget. So, so going forward, any new debt, whether it's school related, the library or anything else, that's all going to be falling under the town budget. So you're not going to see that offset on this slide in terms of the interest expense. Next slide. This just gives you a little bit more detailed walkthrough. My call, you started at the top of what last year's operational budget was. Talked about some of the union contracts that we had and then driving this, and then other salary changes. We actually have a staffing adjustment lines. One of the things I've always tried to do is if I'm going to add a position one place, I try to find somewhere to save some hours or reduce a position. And I've also tried to be disciplined that if we have vacancies for an extended period of time, then we determine if we really need the position. And so that's something that we've gone through that exercise. And if something's been vacant for 18 months, perhaps, we have a conversation with the department, we kind of go through it and try to understand why the vacancy continues. And then sometimes we might decide, let's try not having the position. We've survived for this long, so let's eliminate the position. So that's actually a savings that we have in the budget. And then that's a net number. So that includes an additional, and I'll walk through this in a few minutes, of a additional headcount in the police department. And then healthcare is a big number, and then just some other benefits. And then there's some additional operational costs, and then we have our outside groups. The library came in and made some requests. They're dealing with the same issues that the town is dealing with inflation affecting some of their operations, and utilities and things like that, and the fire department. So all of that kind of totals to $793,000, which gets us to our recommended operational budget. Next slide, just highlights some of the staffing. I kind of tried to break it out a little bit by department, but I actually had them look back at our FTEs over the last, I think, 5 years, and we're pretty much flat. You know, we might have like 0.25 up this year, down 0.25, because the strategy has always been we're reinvesting. We're constantly looking at our staffing, you know, and putting, we're going to increase here, then is there a place that we can save? And actually this year shows a net change of roughly 0.75 FTEs. And so that's accounting for hours. So it's not head count, but that's hours. The other thing I wanted to highlight, I know there's been a lot of conversations about police staffing, and we very much work closely in partnership with the MPD and the Board of Police Commissioners. Their really desires to increase our head count of patrol officers, and they're recommending they want to get 2 more officers in. And so we have 1 in this budget for this next fiscal year, because we also know we have 3 vacant positions. And it's been real struggle to hire, recruit, and retain police officers. It's a very challenging environment. It has nothing to do with Madison. We pay really well. We've got a great work environment, but it's just a difficult, and you'll hear this across the state. A lot of towns are struggling about hiring police officers. So knowing that we have 3 vacant positions already, and we're gonna add an additional officer, that's 4 vacancies. And keeping that mindset, we don't wanna pay for vacant positions, tax people for them. Our thought was, we're gonna add the next one at the beginning of the 25-26 budget. So our board passed even last night a resolution committing to that we will recommend that and support that in next year's budget. And so that will be included in next year's budget. But that will get us to that goal of kind of 32, which I know the chief has talked about. And it may be that we might need more than that, but that's something that we need to continue to evaluate and look at and make sure that we're filling the slots that we have. And if we're not filling them, what do we need to do to get those people, get those officers in those positions? So, but there's a strong commitment from our board to continue to support the police staffing. Next slide. And one of the reasons is obviously because of the strategic plan. That is a goal, a safe and healthy community. These are some of the major drivers of our strategic plan, and I just highlighted some areas. This isn't all inclusive, but if you look at these, I forget what they were called, critical success factors, or there's a name for each of these categories, but anyway, so we tried to look at, you know, what do we have in this budget that aligns with those objectives that the community has set in the strategic plan. And so this just gives you a little example of some of those. So next slide. Capital, I've talked a lot about the capital funding, and what this just lays out is kind of the mini savings accounts for our long-term capital plan. So every year we put money away to save for things that we know are coming on the horizon. And so there was an increase suggested by the CIP committee to increase what we put in some of these savings accounts, and that's about $275,000. That's driving that number that you saw earlier, one of the larger drivers. The good thing is we've done a lot to get the grant awards that offsets the need to put into the savings account. So this is what we're saving now, but the cost of these projects are actually much higher, but we're getting grants to pay for pay for a portion of those projects. And we have a lot that's going to be happening this year because of our capital plan. Garden Point is going to be happening in the fall finally, and that has been in the capital plan for many years. The town campus HVAC project, they've already started here in terms of getting prep work and everything for the new HVAC system. The firehouse expansion project, that's going to be hopefully starting this fall. And I'm not talking about the bonding projects. We have the new school. They're going to be starting next month or March construction. So it's going to be a very busy time in Madison. You'll see a lot of activity, but it takes years to get to this point where we can actually implement and get these projects done. So we're excited to see a lot of these start this year. Next slide is I'll briefly, I've said this many times with the Madison investment plan, it's all those things I talked about in trying to, you know, keep that mill rate down and using every resource we can to minimize the impact on the taxpayer, but get as much done as we can and stay ahead of capital or facility issues or capital issues. And so we've been taking money from grants, aggressively going after grants. also we have this large fund balance. And so our goal, and this is another reason when we look at the budget, we're trying to, get things out of the budget that we're not, that aren't being paid for, some of the positions, for example, because we're taxing people, taking that money in, and then what happens at the end of the year, if the position's still unfilled, the money just goes back into the general fund, and that's why that $20 million kind of number. There's a lot of things that drive that, but that's one thing that happens. So these are all the things I've talked about a lot. This is important because it's a long-term plan, and it tries to have that keeping the budget steady and consistent, and trying to keep that tax rate down. Next slide. In our, as part of the strategy is, there were a few things in this budget that we thought should get out of the kind of recurring budget base, and that should be paid for in a different way. One of them is using remaining ARPA funds. We have to have committed by the end of this year all the ARPA funds. And so we have some money left, and we had some projects that came in under budget, and so we're assessing where we are on those. And so we're recommending paying some things in town out of ARPA again. And one of them is the downtown lighting project, and that's been an ongoing saga. But we think it's important, but we feel like, is this something that the town wants to build into its budget base, or do we want to use outside funding when we can? And so we decided to do that. We've also talking about setting up a small equipment fund to handle all these smaller one-off purchases for technology, or tasers, or things that come up during the year that aren't really like recurring items. And then the other thing we talked about was, do we want to do it like we did last year, take some of the fund balance and put an infusion into CIP again? In 2023, we put $3.5 million. What that does is it builds up the savings account in our capital plan. So take the money out of the fund balance and put it into the savings accounts for the capital plan. And that'll help us over the next couple of years not have to put as much into the capital plan. So that's our board talked about that. These are things that we're recommending to the Board of Finance. And then the pension, there's some ways that we could actually front load some of the increasing pension costs through a special appropriation. Next slide. This is just, and I presented this before, it talks a bit about the mill rate, with the revaluation, and historically you see the mill rate kind of go up, and then you have a reval, and then the mill rate goes down. Where we're coming out now is kind of in line with where previous revals have been, not to 2018, but if you go back to 2013 or 2007 and 2002, you saw that kind of reduction in the mill rate in the 20 to 30% range. So that's kind of where we're falling again. And the goal that where we come out now with the assumption that we've made, it implies a mill rate of 22.09 of a 26% reduction. And that will be really in the hands of the Board of Finance. So, and we've just kind of given you some suggestions about how to get there. Next slide. And finally, this is just a summary of where we are with the budgets. I think a lot of thought and effort went into this. I give a lot of credit to the staff to help with this and work through it, and then also to our board, because I think we really tried to sharpen our pencils and do the best that we can to come up with something that also is meeting the community needs and aligned with what the community wants from its government. So with that, that is the proposed budget by the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you for Selectmen. The number of suggestions for the Board of Finance.
Yes, we're
It's nice to help us out like that. We really do appreciate that.
We're not shy.
You're not shy. Neither are we. We have a good Board of Finance. Trying to get towards the end, to get past, no offense, Peggy's.
That's it.
I think that's it.
That's it.
I think it's just questions.
Yeah. Just a couple of quick comments, and again, I want to thank Stacy, Kristen, and the team in the finance office, because they really do a great job. And the first Selectwoman and our superintendent and our Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen, our Board of Finance, thank you for being here. And you touched on a couple of things. I just want to stress one more thing. The grants are so important, especially for CIP. It's just one less dollar we have to come up with. And it just helps so much. It's different than when you get a grant for a position that may go away, and then if you need a position, well, you get grant money, and it takes a lot more work, and it's a compliment to you and your team. It really makes a big difference. It's just one less local tax dollar we have to use, and I think sometimes that gets underscored. And reevaluation is reevaluation. reevaluation. It would be nice if everybody's got reevaluated the same exact way, but it doesn't. But, I think the goal is to, control the expenses, do what we can, and to cut that mill rate as best we can, so we can keep it around 2%. I don't know if anybody heard, but that was a suggestion that was made by the Board of Selectmen. So I'm going to open up with any questions for myself or Dr. Cook or Selectwoman. I'll start in the audience. Anybody have any questions? Sir, name
I
and
don't
address.
have a question, but I have a comment. Is that in order?
Sure, you can say your name and address, so you can give a
Sure.
comment.
Yes, my name is Keith Luckenbach. My given name is J. Keith Luckenbach. I live at 21 Tibblesbridge Road. I happen to be the president of the Board of Trustees of the Scranton Memorial Library. I would just like to apprise the Board of Finance, our situation currently in the library. The budget team, which comprises the president, the treasurer, the business manager, and the director of the library, received the suggestion of the Board of Selectmen relative to the budget that we had presented, and it obviously was short of what we had desired. We were pretty much told by the Board of Selectmen to eliminate a maintenance manager and the vacation supplement. And we have eliminated as we're working on creating this particular budget to be presented. We have eliminated in our meetings our request for a maintenance manager and the vacation supplement. We're hoping that the town will be able to assist us with maintenance as it has implied. But we are concerned about the elimination of the vacation supplement because that provides for substitutes in the event of absences. We are resolute in our desire to give staff members a 2.5% increase. This is in line with what town employees are receiving in the coming fiscal year. Doing so, however, will necessitate a reduction in popular library programs, reduced number of new items anticipated in the collection. Moreover, upkeep in technology and equipment as well as general repairs will have to be limited vis-a-vis what we gave the Board of Selectmen. We're struggling with attempting to work with a budget that is less than our current forecast. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate your input. It was mentioned earlier about the debt service and how that's no longer on the Board of Education side. It's now on the town side. I think we all believe, or it should be. The point is, even though the Board of Ed is operating those buildings, the town buildings, eventually, if they were to close, they turn it back over to the town. So I think it's appropriate. My point is with the library, we're all one town. I'm sure they are to help it out with the maintenance and to work together is exactly why we're here. But thank you. Anybody else from the public would like to comment, question?
There's someone online.
Have a, you're deferring to the outline, thank you. Go ahead, Jim.
Hi, my name is Jim Parenti, and we live at 47 Seaview Avenue. On behalf of my family, I'd like to first acknowledge and thank the first select woman and each member of the Board of Selectmen for their leadership in passing last night's special resolution in support of public safety. Today, I've heard from many residents of our town, and they all feel the same way. That special resolution is a powerful statement of support for constructively dealing with the criminal activity that has plagued our town for the past few years. Again, you have our gratitude. To the Board of Finance, as you deliberate regarding the town's budget, I would make a couple of observations. First of all, listen to our community. Listen to the Board of Selectmen. Listen to the town's experts on public safety, namely the Board of Police Commissioners and the Chief of Police. According to political scientists and other experts on our form of government, there is no higher priority than public safety. Everything else is secondary to that. You've heard the first select woman talk about the overall budget, and the allocation of additional resources to the MPD. The funding for additional police officers, whether it be 1, 2, or whatever the number is a drop in the bucket compared to the town's overall budget. The cost of being wrong is immense. So please approve without modification the budget proposed by the Board of Selectmen as it pertains to the police department. Finally, I want to thank all of our town's officials for their efforts on behalf of our community. Some of you are elected officials, some of you are volunteers. Regardless, thank you for everything you do to keep the residents of our town safe and to ensure our quality of life. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Have a good night. Sir.
This is not a coordinated,
You didn't coordinate the effort to come to town.
I hear you. I'm Ed Dowling. I'm chairman of the Board of Police Commissioners, Hammonasset Meadows. And I just wanted to speak to the question of the approval of the second police officer position that was requested in the police department, the police commission's budget request. First, reiterate what Jim said. Thank you very much, Board of Selectmen, for the resolution that was passed. Realize it's symbolic, but very much appreciate that funding commitment for the second position. I just wanted to speak very, very briefly about what influenced the request that was developed by the police commissions. And the starting point is really the partnership that we felt as police commissioners that we felt with both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. Regardless of the political party, I think since I've been a member of the commission, there's been a terrific positive cooperation and relationship, recognizing that you have certain key approval and authority as elected members, and we, the police commission, have certain responsibilities related directly to the oversight of the police department and public safety. What influenced the key request this year as we went through this process over a number of months, and I'll just hit the highlights, was one, the data we received that showed, although Madison continues to be a safe community, the gradual increase in crime that was occurring in terms of auto thefts, break-ins, etc. Related to that was a comparable data of peer communities that showed Madison continues to be relatively understaffed. Now, we looked at that. We also were presented with information of the housing and the cluster communities that were coming on stream, were approved or in the process to be approved over the next 12 to 24 months. Now, this is just data, just trend line and reference. On the other hand, when we look at these incidents, if we're looking at Dr. Cook, and he said there's going to be, we see a gradual increase in the number of students. At some point, he and the superintendent and the board, superintendent of the school board would say that trend line is going to mean more teachers at some point. Not tomorrow, not next month, but at some point we're going to need more teachers. When we look at this trend data, at some point we feel we're going to need more police officers. The other consideration that we took into account was the nature of the crimes that were being committed. We've seen a gradual change from the 2 a.m. car break-ins to now the public safety announcement is if you're pumping gas on Route 1 at noon, lock your car. Stickers you see, whether you're in Guilford or Clinton. So the nature of the crime that we see is changing. The other last influence that ties it all together, we've heard at multiple meetings from citizens echoing some of the comments Jim mentioned. You've gotten as many, probably more emails as select person that we've gotten, with people decrying kind of what is happening in terms of Madison. How is this eroding the quality of life that they felt? And so some of this is
you just cannot answer it except for the famous bank robber Willie Sutton when asked, why do you rob banks? The answer is, that's where the money is. So we're not going to get into analysis of why all this is happening, but we've got to deal with it. The last thing I'll say is the question came up. I was told that it was very unusual for the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance to receive a position request in the last quarter of the fiscal year. Very unusual. And we discussed at the Board of Police Commissioners the timing of that. And the sense was we valued the partnership and the relationship with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. And by positioning that position request in June, we would have a minimal impact on the 24-25 budget year. We would have kind of a partnership. Okay, we're asking for a position, but we're not going to, adversely impact the 24-25 budget. In retrospect, that might have been a mistake because there was absolutely no intent to try to take the authority, the approval authority out of the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance by saying, by asking for this position in June, you're told you basically are backloading and the funding obligation is going to occur in fiscal 25 and 26. So spent a career dealing with headcount, and that was not our intent to try to get a position approved without appropriate authority for those later years without going through the process. So my request in summary is to please reconsider getting this position approved, and I appreciate the resolution, getting this position approved. We recognize the stewardship of managing the expense budget in 25 and 26 and beyond. I think you should not look at this as an expense obligation in 26 beyond, but the other way, it's an investment in the public safety going forward fiscal 25, 26 and beyond. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ed. Anybody else from the public who'd like to speak in the audience? Online? Thanks, Gene. Once, twice, 3 times, that public information session is now closed. Again, the process for the Board of Finance and for all of us is still ongoing. And for us, I don't want to say it's just beginning because we've been part of this all along, but we want to hear from the public. We want to hear your input. We do appreciate your comments. And we're looking forward to working together over the next few months. Thank you everyone for being here. Enjoy your evening. Have a good night.